What if the single act of kindness that cost you your job turned out to be the very thing that saved your life? And not just yours, but hundreds of others. The night was heavy with rain, the kind that doesn't fall in sheets, but lingers drumming endlessly against the glass, as if reminding everyone in Seattle that warmth is always temporary. Inside the polished walls of the Silver Lantern, an upscale restaurant where mahogany tables gleamed and crystal glasses caught the light, like chandeliers in a ballroom the world pretended to be perfect. Patrons dined on scallops brushed with truffle butter, while the sound of forks and quiet laughter masked the storm outside. But for Emily Carter, 26 years old and already carrying the weight of a lifetime, the Silver Lantern was not an escape. It was a cage disguised as luxury. Each night, she slipped into her crisp black blouses and tailored slacks, pressing her hair into a neat bun, forcing a smile that rarely reached her eyes. She could glide between tables with the grace of someone trained to disappear into the background. But behind the smile was a silent calculation. Rent due in 5 days. Michael's next round of treatments costing more than her monthly paycheck, and the landlord's warning that one missed payment would mean eviction. Every glass she filled, every plate she cleared, every laugh she faked, it wasn't just customer service. It was survival. At home, there was no perfume of truffle oil, no polished cutlery. Just a cramped 2-bedroom apartment that always smelled faintly of antiseptic. That was where her younger brother Michael lay, curled beneath a quilt, his face pale, his breath sometimes shallow. A boy of only 12 whose childhood had been stolen by a rare genetic disorder. His medication bottles lined the counter like soldiers, each one another reminder of the battle Emily fought daily. She worked shifts that broke her back, read late into the night about medical treatments she barely understood, and stretched dollars until they snapped. The Silver Lantern knew nothing of this. To the restaurant's patrons, Emily was just another pleasant waitress refilling their wine-offering specials, pretending not to notice when they snapped fingers or whispered complaints about the temperature of the soup. She played her role. And in the quiet moments, she wondered how much longer she could. At the center of this gilded stage prowled Victor Hale, the restaurant's manager. His presence was felt before it was seen expensive cologne that clung 2 heavy shoes polished to a glare voice always carrying the edge of superiority. He was the kind of man who spotted fingerprints on a wine glass like a hawk sighting prey. For him, the staff were pawns to be arranged, humiliated, discarded. His favorite sport was correction, public, sharp, humiliating. If a glass of water wasn't filled to the rim, if a crumb dared linger on the tablecloth, Victor would strike. Emily learned quickly that in Victor's world, dignity was optional, but obedience was not. She absorbed his insults, kept her chin lifted, and carried on. Because what choice did she have? Yet even as she folded napkins and balanced trays, her mind was never in that room. It was with Michael always, Michael, his labored breathing, his thin smile, his whispered jokes that tried to shield her from the truth. Emily's every decision traced back to him, and that made her dangerous. Because for someone like Emily Carter, living on the knife's edge of desperation, one moment, just one, could tip her entire world into collapse, or into something she could never imagine. The storm had grown heavier by the hour, the kind of Pacific Northwest rain that doesn't relent, but pounds the pavement until the city feels washed in gray. Inside the Silver Lantern, though everything shimmered with warmth, glasses refilled steaks, sizzling conversations rising in laughter. Emily Carter moved through it all like a shadow balancing trays and pleasantries, her body present. But her mind somewhere far away, counting dollars, measuring pills, hearing Michael's laugh in her memory. Then she saw him. The front doors opened with a rush of cold air, and standing just beyond the threshold was a man who didn't belong. His coat was torn, soaked through his boots, leaving small puddles on the marble. His beard was grizzled, tangled, streaked with gray. and his hands trembled faintly as he gripped the lapels of his coat. He didn't beg. He didn't speak. He just stood there staring into the golden glow of the restaurant, as though it were another world entirely. His eyes, though tired, were startlingly lucid. They weren't the eyes of someone lost to madness. They were the eyes of someone crushed by circumstance, but still human, still present. Emily froze mid-step, tray in hand. For a moment, she didn't see a stranger. She saw Michael, his frail chest rising under 2 heavy blankets, his thin arms, his brave smile that tried to cover pain. The sight stole Emily's breath, but she wasn't the only one who noticed. Victor Hale's sharp eyes locked on the man, and fury twisted across his face. He stormed toward the door with the self-righteous authority of someone protecting a fortress from invasion. His voice, though low, carried like thunder. Not here, not tonight, not ever. Emily felt her stomach knot. She knew what was about to happen. Victor would humiliate him, drive him back into the rain like garbage tossed from a silver tray. Her pulse raced. Every instinct screamed, "Don't. Keep your head down. You can't afford this fight." Michael needed her steady paycheck. Her life depended on this job, and yet, could she watch it happen? Could she let Victor strip away what little dignity this man still had? Her feet moved before her mind made the choice. She stepped out from the line of tables and intercepted Victor, her hand brushing his arm. "Victor," she whispered urgently, "wait, please." He turned on her like a snake ready to strike, his face flushed. "Emily, get back to your tables. Now, just let me give him something warm. Soup, bread. I'll pay for it myself. He's not hurting anyone." Victor's lip curled, his voice seething through clenched teeth. "You want to serve him. You want to bring that filth into my kitchen's orbit. He'll scare off paying customers. This is a fine dining establishment, not a shelter. Back down or hand me your apron." The words struck like a whip. Around them, forks paused in midair. Diners leaned slightly closer, pretending not to eavesdrop. Fiona, Emily's co-worker near the service station, mouthed a desperate no. Time stretched painfully thin. Emily's hand trembled. She saw Michael's face in her mind again, pale, fighting for breath. She saw the eviction notice tacked to their door last month, the pile of bills waiting at home. Survival demanded obedience, but something stronger demanded defiance. Slowly, with deliberate care, she reached behind her waist, untied the black apron, folded it neatly just as she did at the end of every shift, and held it out to Victor. Gasps rippled across the room. Victor's jaw twitched in disbelief before he snatched the apron from her hands. "Fine." He spat, his voice cutting like glass. "You're done here. Get out." Emily didn't flinch. She turned past him and walked to the man at the door. His eyes widened in stunned silence as she gestured gently. "Come with me, sir. Please." He hesitated, then followed, his soaked boots squeaking against the polished floor. She led him to a quiet corner table, pulled out a chair, and motioned for him to sit. Moments later, she placed a steaming bowl of soup before him, its aroma rich and comforting, a stark contrast to the hostility filling the room. "Eat," she said softly. "That's all." Behind her, Victor seethed in silence, unwilling to cause a greater scene. Emily knew it was over. She was fired, disgraced, and walking into a storm without a plan. But as she stepped out into the cold Seattle night rain soaking through her thin jacket, Emily felt something unexpected. She was terrified. She was jobless. But for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace because she had chosen compassion over fear. The rain hadn't let up by the time Emily Carter stumbled through the front door of her apartment. Her clothes clung to her skin, her shoes squelched with every step, and the chill of the storm seemed to sink deep into her bones. She closed the door softly behind her, careful not to wake her younger brother. For a moment, she just leaned there, head resting against the peeling paint eyes, shut, trying to hold herself together. The air smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic, a scent she had come to associate with both comfort and dread. She moved into the tiny kitchen, flicking on the light. The refrigerator hummed in protest as she opened it, revealing little more than a half-empty carton of milk, a single egg, and condiments that had long since expired. On the counter nearby sat a small mountain of envelopes, overdue bills, medical statements, warning notices, all waiting for her acknowledgement, all screaming her failure. She forced herself into the living room where Michael, just 12 years old, lay asleep on the worn-out couch. His chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm, the nebulizer's quiet hum filling the silence. The pale glow of the machine made his face look even thinner, too young to carry so much suffering. Emily's heart twisted. She crouched beside him, brushing damp hair from his forehead. He stirred, eyes flickering open just long enough to register her presence. She smiled, though her lips trembled. "Go back to sleep, champ," she whispered. "I'm making us something special in the morning. Chocolate chip pancakes." Michael gave a faint, drowsy grin before his eyes drifted shut again. She kissed his temple, then rose quickly, turning away before he could see the tears spilling down her cheeks. In the small bedroom she claimed as her own, Emily sat heavily on the edge of the bed. The mattress springs groaned, matching her exhaustion. She pulled out her phone, opened her banking app, and stared at the numbers on the screen. They were laughably small, barely enough for groceries, nowhere near rent, nowhere near medication. The room blurred as fresh tears burned her eyes. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed soundlessly, shoulders shaking, terrified of letting Michael hear. Sleep never came. The hours stretched, broken by the distant drip of rain against the window. Every fear replayed in her mind: eviction, hospital bills, her brother's fragile health slipping further without proper care. The courage she had felt in the restaurant, standing tall as she gave away her apron, now seemed like recklessness. She had chosen dignity over survival, and survival was no longer guaranteed. At dawn, Emily finally drifted into a restless doze, only to be startled awake by a sharp knock at the door. It wasn't the gentle knock of a neighbor. It was firm, official. Her heart lurched. She hurried to the door, pulling her sweater around her. A man in a crisp courier's uniform stood in the hallway holding a sleek black envelope and a clipboard. "Emily Carter?" he asked. Her throat was dry. "Yes. This is for you. Sign here, please." She scribbled her name with a shaking hand. The courier nodded and left without a word. Emily closed the door, leaning against it, as if bracing for impact. The envelope was heavy, the cardstock expensive, her name printed in sharp, elegant letters. She tore it open, fingers trembling. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored paper, an invitation to appear at a downtown law office the following morning at 10 o'clock. The language was formal, almost cold, a matter of urgent personal and professional importance. Emily read it twice, then a third time. Her breath caught in her chest. Of course. Victor. He wasn't done with her. He was suing her, dragging her into court for insubordination, defamation, whatever charge he could invent. The envelope slipped from her hands onto the floor. She stared at it, hollow and numb. Last night she had felt a fleeting pride. Now it was gone, replaced by a heavier, suffocating despair. She had risked everything for compassion, and it seemed compassion had just signed her ruin. The next morning, Emily Carter, dressed in the best clothes she owned, a black dress that had seen better days, and a cardigan whose edges were beginning to fray. She stood at the bus stop under a dull Seattle sky, the invitation tucked carefully into her purse. Every raindrop that splattered the pavement seemed to echo the same fear inside her chest. Victor is going to ruin me. The bus rumbled downtown, and as the skyscrapers rose higher, her anxiety climbed with them. When she finally stepped off on 4th Avenue, she craned her neck upward at the tower of glass and steel that pierced the gray clouds. The sign near the entrance read, "Pembroke and Miles Attorneys at Law." The name itself felt intimidating, polished, untouchable. Inside the lobby was a cathedral of marble and glass. Polished floors reflected the light like water, and a wall of windows offered a sweeping view of the Sound. People in suits moved with purpose, their shoes clicking like clockwork across the vast space. Emily felt small out of place, like a single note in a grand, indifferent symphony. A receptionist greeted her with unexpected warmth and immediately directed her to a private elevator. The ride was silent, the hum of machinery amplifying her racing thoughts. She was convinced the doors would open to a courtroom or a boardroom, where Victor Hale sat smirking, waiting to dismantle what little she had left. Instead, she was escorted into a quiet conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below the harbor, glittering in the morning light. At the head of the long mahogany table sat an older man, with a neatly trimmed beard, his gray suit crisp, his eyes calm but penetrating. "Miss Carter," he said, standing to shake her hand. "Richard Pembroke. Please sit." She perched nervously at the edge of a leather chair, clutching her purse. "Am I being sued?" she asked softly, her voice almost breaking. Richard gave her a faint, sympathetic smile. "On the contrary, you are here because an injustice was done to you, and my client wishes to see it made right." Before Emily could respond, the door opened behind her. She turned, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. A man walked in, not in rags, not soaked with rain, not trembling with cold, but in an impeccably tailored suit, his shoes polished, his presence commanding. His hair was combed back, his jaw clean-shaven. But the eyes, those intelligent, deeply sad eyes, were the same ones she had seen across the dining room of the Silver Lantern. Emily's breath caught, her mind reeled. It was him. "Miss Carter," he said gently, a hint of apology in his tone. "I believe we've met before." "My name is Jonathan Miles." Her jaw slackened. She knew the name. Everyone did. Jonathan Miles, the billionaire tech magnate whose face graced magazine covers, whose fortune shaped half the digital world, a man often called one of the most powerful in the Pacific Northwest. And she had given him soup. Her voice trembled. You were..." In disguise, Jonathan finished for her. He gave a small nod, acknowledging her disbelief. "I occasionally walk the city without my name, without my wealth. It allows me to see people truly see them without the filter of power. 2 nights ago, I chose the Silver Lantern." Emily's heart pounded in her ears. Jonathan continued, his voice low but steady. "I wanted to understand the culture of Sterling Dining Group, the corporation behind that restaurant. I suspected rot beneath the polish. What I witnessed confirmed every suspicion. Your manager's cruelty, his disdain, his obsession with profit over people, none of it shocked me. What did surprise me was you." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "You gave away your security for a stranger. You sacrificed everything in that moment. Do you know how rare that is?" Emily couldn't speak. Her hands trembled in her lap. Richard Pembroke slid a folder across the table. "As of this morning, Miss Carter's Sterling Dining Group's regional executives have been terminated. Victor Hale included. The Silver Lantern will close permanently at the end of the week." Emily blinked, stunned. "Because of me?" Jonathan shook his head gently. "Not because of you. Because of them. But you were the proof I needed. Proof that decency still exists in a world that far too often rewards cruelty." The words settled over her like a storm breaking. She wasn't ruined. She wasn't on trial. Somehow, impossibly, she was at the center of something far bigger than herself. The silence in the conference room stretched, broken only by the soft hum of the city beyond the glass. Emily Carter sat rigid, trying to absorb what she had just heard, that the Silver Lantern was finished, that Victor Hale's reign of cruelty had ended. But before she could fully process it, Richard Pembroke reached again for the folder on the polished table and slid it closer to her. "Miss Carter," he said quietly, "there's something else you need to see." Her hands trembled as she pulled the folder open. The first page stopped her breath entirely. It wasn't legal paperwork. It was a letter of acceptance. Her eyes darted over the heading Seattle Children's Specialty Clinic. The same clinic she had dreamed of, researched in sleepless nights, prayed for, though she knew she could never afford it. The letter confirmed that Michael Carter had been accepted into a treatment program, fully funded, every expense covered. Medications, therapies, hospital stays, even specialized equipment for home care, all of it. Emily's vision blurred as tears welled up. She pressed a hand to her mouth, struggling to breathe through the wave of disbelief crashing over her. For months, she had lived in fear, scraping dollars together, lying awake at night, imagining her brother's future shrinking to nothing. And here, in a single page, it was as if a mountain had been lifted off her chest. When she finally found her voice, it cracked. I don't understand. Who paid for this?" Jonathan Miles leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady, his tone almost reverent. "My late wife Evelyn and I began building a foundation before she passed. It was her dream that wealth should serve those who fight battles most people never see. Families like yours, children like Michael. After her death, I lost sight of that mission. Until the other night when I met you." Emily's tears spilled freely now. Relief tangled with gratitude, but also confusion. She shook her head. This is too much. I don't deserve this." Jonathan's voice softened. "It isn't about deserving. It's about recognizing courage when it reveals itself. That night you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Yet you chose compassion. You reminded me of Evelyn's words that true decency shines brightest in the darkest hours." Emily's chest ached with emotion, her fingers curling around the folder as if it might vanish if she let go. "Thank you," she whispered. It was all she could manage. But Jonathan wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his expression firm but kind. "Emily, this isn't just charity. I'm not here to hand out favors. I'm here to build something lasting. The foundation needs more than money and strategy. It needs a conscience. It needs someone who understands the fight from the inside. That's why I want you to join us." Her brow furrowed. "Join you, yes. As Director of Family Advocacy, you would be the voice for families like yours. You'd help them navigate the labyrinth of treatments, insurance, and fear. You'd ensure that our policies put people before profit, that no one is overlooked, forgotten, or silenced." Emily shook her head quickly, panic flickering across her face. No, you don't understand. I'm just a waitress. I don't have a degree. I don't have training. I wouldn't know where to start." Jonathan's eyes held hers unwavering. "Emily, you were never just a waitress. You were a woman carrying the weight of the world and still finding the strength to be kind. That is not something you can teach. That is the conscience money can't buy. And that's exactly what we need." The room seemed to close in around her. Relief for Michael, a job she could never have imagined, and the terrifying possibility of stepping into a role far greater than herself. For Emily Carter, the test of courage had only just begun. 6 months later, the Seattle sky was still painted in its familiar shades of gray rain, drifting in soft curtains across the city. But for Emily Carter, the drizzle no longer felt oppressive. From her office on the 24th floor of the Miles Foundation building, the rain looked almost cleansing, like a veil washing the city clean. Her office was bright and modern, but not cold. Along one wall stretched a massive corkboard, covered not with financial charts or corporate graphs, but with photographs. Dozens of smiling children, their faces radiant with joy, pinned alongside handwritten thank you notes from parents. Each picture told a story of struggle transformed into hope. At the center of them all was Michael standing tall in his school uniform, cheeks flushed with color, a wide grin breaking across his once pale face. The treatments had worked miracles. The foundation's grant covered everything: the medicine, the braces, the physical therapy. Michael was thriving again, back in class part-time, his laughter once more echoing through their small apartment. The boy who once lay tethered to machines now talked about playing baseball when spring came around. For Emily, every smile, every step he took was a victory worth more than gold. Her own transformation was no less striking. Gone was the anxious waitress, measuring every dollar and every breath. In her place stood the director of family advocacy, a woman who spoke daily with parents, comforted them in waiting rooms, guided them through paperwork that once felt like an impossible maze. She was the bridge between families and the foundation's resources, the voice that reminded Jonathan Miles and his board that compassion had to be the cornerstone of every decision. She wasn't alone. Others from her past had found new beginnings too. Fiona, her sharp-witted co-worker from the Silver Lantern, now managed outreach programs for the foundation. Her sarcastic humor was still intact, but it was wielded in service of scheduling family events and lifting spirits. She often joked that instead of refilling bread baskets, she now refilled lives with joy. Chef Peterson, the burly cook, who once risked his job to slip Emily a bowl of soup, had taken his severance and opened a small bistro across town. The sign above the door read, "The Kind Spoon." His restaurant had become a quiet refuge for working folks, good food at fair prices served with dignity. On weekends, Emily and Michael sometimes stopped by, and Peterson always insisted their meal was on the house. And Victor Hale, the man who once prowled the Silver Lantern with cruelty sharpened like a blade, was disgraced. His career in hospitality ended abruptly. Rumors swirled about lawsuits, debts, and rejections from every restaurant group in the region. To Emily, his fall was not something to celebrate, but a reminder that arrogance built on fear always collapses eventually. Through it all, Jonathan and Emily worked side by side. He was still the strategist, building alliances, leveraging wealth, speaking the language of power. But she had become his compass, the conscience that kept the mission grounded. In meetings, she challenged him without hesitation. He listened, trusted her perspective, and together they reshaped how philanthropy touched families, not as statistics, but as human beings with names, dreams, and fragile hopes. Some evenings, when the office lights dimmed and the city glowed beneath them, Jonathan would stand by the window, hands in his pockets, and glance at Emily. "One bowl of soup," he would say with quiet wonder. And Emily would smile, her eyes on the board of children's faces. "One bowl of soup," she'd echo, knowing it had sparked a ripple that reached far beyond her own life, a ripple that had changed countless others. The rain still fell over Seattle, steady and unending. But Emily Carter no longer saw it as a burden. From her office, high above the city, the drizzle looked almost like silver threads stitching together stories of pain, resilience, and hope. She touched the corkboard wall filled with children's photographs, her hand lingering on Michael's smiling face. 6 months ago, she had walked into the storm jobless, hopeless, and terrified. Today she stood as a voice for families who once felt just as lost as she had. The narrator's voice softens. Emily's act of kindness did not end at that table in the corner of the Silver Lantern. It dismantled arrogance, fueled justice, and built a future for families like hers. She proved that compassion is the most powerful currency of all. In the quiet, Emily often thought back to the moment, the dripping coat, the trembling hands, the eyes that had met hers with a silent plea. A stranger at the door, a choice made in seconds. She had folded her apron, set it down, and changed the course of her life forever. What she learned was simple yet profound. Sometimes the smallest act, a bowl of soup, a folded apron, a choice to see humanity, can echo further than we imagine. One bowl had brought her brother life-saving care, had torn down a corrupt empire, had given birth to a foundation that would help countless others. It wasn't about reward. It wasn't about recognition. It was about answering the quiet call to see another person as human. The lesson is one that lingers. When the moment comes, when it costs us something to care, will we look away? Or will we step forward? Jonathan often reminded her that wealth can build structures, but only conscience can give them meaning. And Emily had become that conscience, not just for him, but for every family who walked through the foundation's doors. The narrator's tone turns warm, inviting. If Emily's story moved you, take a moment to share it with someone who still believes kindness matters. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, true or inspired by the extraordinary in ordinary lives, consider subscribing. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Because maybe, just maybe, your words could be the ripple that changes someone else's world. Emily knew now that kindness was never wasted. It was a seed planted in silence, watered in sacrifice, grown into something she could never have predicted. And as she looked out over the city, she felt certain that somewhere someone else was about to face their own choice. And maybe, just maybe, they would choose compassion too.